Before the video begins, I quickly want to shout out my powerthon/subathon event I'm running on my Twitch starting on Monday the 11th, where I'm trying to grind from 400 power to 450 in under 1 week with potential special guest appearances. So be sure to catch me live at twitch.tv/llama2. And now back to the video. Right, hello guys, and welcome back to what I believe is my third Titan build for the Edge of Fate. And I promise you, the title is not a lie. This build that we have here today is by far the most broken, overpowered, strong, insert adjective here, Titan build there is right now. And today I'm going to make it my job to try and convince you why that is. So before we get into any specifics, I just want to show you how the build itself works. So I'm just going to spawn in some chunky targets here, and then we are just going to go like this, here, boom. We're just going to carry on just mowing through ads with our hand cannon and our abilities, and it just never ends. We can just carry on doing this. Infinite ammo, infinite melees, you know, the list goes on. It's pretty bloody good. The basis of today's build, as you probably already guessed, is the insurmountable Skullfort Titan exotic helmet. And the reason we're taking this is because its perk states that final blows with arc melees trigger health regeneration and fully restore a melee charge. Melee hits grant arc melee energy. And I'm sure you're all aware by now what Skullfort does. It's just a very classic exotic, but in the Edge of Fate it has become much better due to a very specific buff given to the knockout aspect. And that is the fact that for powered melees, the increased damage it gives to powered melees was raised from the previous 50% pre-Edge of Fate to now 160%, aka 2.6 times base damage. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like here. So normally, as you can see here, my melee deals 835 damage, but when I have knockout active, it's going to go all the way to 2,171. And I'll have the numbers up on screen, but that is a 2.6 times increase, otherwise known as 160%. And it's very easy to reproc. All you need to do is just get kills with your melee and then just carry on, you know, just doing that. It's not refreshable, however, it's just very easy to proc again, and you get, you know, roughly 7 seconds of that increased damage window. So that's Skullfort. You guys basically already know how that works. And basically what that ends up letting you do is if you combine it with 200 melee stats, which is going to increase your melee damage by 30%, a 1-2 punch weapon like the Phonutria Ferro we have here, or a shotgun, I'll get into the choices between that in a moment, you are going to be doing some serious damage that not even Consecration can currently do. Consecration, by the way, is basically fully gone. I would say this build is much better in the context of Titan melee builds, and I also just want to prove that to you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to get an orb, which is going to let me get to 200 melee stats, and then I'm going to spawn in Carl here, and I'm going to show you guys how much damage my Thunderclap is able to do versus Carl. So with a 1-2 punch shot and fully charged Thunderclap, this is 3,195, so just remember that. Now, if we do the same again, but with Consecration, as you can see, the number, if you add it all up, which will be on screen, is quite a lot lower than it is with Skullfort. And you can basically argue that the AoE blast from Thunderclap is basically the same as it is from Consecration. It's just, you know, rather than along the ground, it's just in the air, but it is a pretty significant reach. And it's kind of the same thing, and it does more damage, and you get it back infinitely so long as you are actually killing things with it. And previously, the trouble with a knockout and insurmountable Skullfort build with Thunderclap was that you weren't able to reliably kill stuff with your Thunderclap because it just wasn't dealing enough damage from the previous knockout percentage. Plus, we didn't have the 200 melee stat bonus, which we do now, and I'm going to try and take the rest of today to explain to you how to best optimize this build, how to sort of fully kit it out to just make the most out of insurmountable Skullfort and this combo, which is very powerful. And throughout the video, I'm going to have random gameplay snippets playing, which actually give you a practical example of what this build looks like, rather than just doing it all in the firing range. Of course, the firing range is useful for seeing how the build works, but in action, it is just way more easy to see that it is actually very powerful. So the gameplay that you are going to be seeing in the background is of a Grandmaster battleground, where I am minus 30 under, and there's a bunch of Banes and so on, and champions, and you will see that this build is just very easily able to mow through that type of content. So back to me for a moment. Going over the subclass, I'm just going to quickly kind of breeze through this. Super, you obviously want Thunder Crash because this is just one of the best supers in the game right now. I like using Thruster for the movement capabilities, then Thunderclap, Shack Grenade for your source of darkness damage to fill your dark meter on your Transcendence. However, you could go Glacier Grenade if you like. I just kind of prefer Shackle over Glacier. That's just me though. You can do what you like. Then for the aspects, we want Knockout and Diamond Lance. RIP Consecration, your time has ended. Knockout, we have this for the healing and becoming amplified after scoring a kill with our melee, which by the way is a 15% damage resist and makes enemies less accurate when targeting you. And then just for getting kills with our melee ability, we're going to be spawning diamond lances. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about with diamond lance is that when you make one, you have the option to throw it or slam it. Now with this build in particular, I want you guys to always be slamming your diamond lance. And the reason for that is because when you do so, it gives you frost armor ×2. And not only just you, it gives it to your teammates as well. And you can do this kind of over and over, as you can see here. I can just slam down on this and keep doing it. It does have a short, maybe 7-second cooldown, but it is nice to just pick these up and get a little bit of frost armor, which is just, you know, a bit of extra damage resistance every now and then. I believe at 5 stacks, frost armor is 36% damage resist. Basically, try to avoid throwing them, just do the slam, because it still freezes the enemies, but it gives you the damage resist as well. And there's also another cool piece of tech you can do with the diamond lance, where if you wanted to throw it for whatever reason, you can also do the slam input at the same time, and it'll just bring your character model down to the ground without taking any fall damage whatsoever. So if you're on a high point, you could do that. Just a bit of starve points, just thought I'd let you know. Diamond lance is also quite good for building dark energy, so that is there to consider. Your light energy is basically fully covered by thunderclap and just being able to get it back very quickly, so don't worry about that. Then for the fragments, we have Facet of Sacrifice. This one is going to give us a little bit of bonus darkness energy whenever we get kills with light abilities. And also a big reason I have this is for the +10 grenade stat boost, because, you know, stats are very valuable in this new system. And so in action, if you take a look at my dark meter here, it is filling up gradually from kills that I get with my thunderclap here, but, you know, it's not a lot. It's mainly just there for the stat bonus or just the kind of smidge to top off your dark meter. The main places you are going to get dark energy is from your dark abilities like your shackle grenade or diamond lances like you see there. After that, we have Facet of Dawn. This one is going to make you radiant for 4 seconds whenever you get a kill with your thunderclap, which is just going to improve your weapon damage by 20%. Then we have Facet of Protection. This is just going to give us a 15% damage resist when we are surrounded by 3 or more combatants, which is just going to be nice for overall survivability. Facet of Awakening. This one is pretty interesting because this one makes it so rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage or super final blows generates an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. And because we have an arc super equipped, it's only going to take 3 kills with our thunderclap to make an ionic trace, and that is just going to give us a little bit of bonus energy to our grenade. You'll probably see it there in the bottom left. So it's just going to help with recharging either our thruster or our grenade just slightly faster. And then finally we have Facet of Courage, again because it gives +10 grenade stat and also makes it so your arc, solar and void abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. And our main darkness debuffs are going to be freeze and suspend, and it's just going to allow our thunderclap to deal 10% more damage to them, but again it's mainly just for the grenade stat. The other component of the build that is pretty important is having a weapon with 1-2 punch. Now this could either be a shotgun or it could be the brand new Phonutria Ferra hand cannon with 1-2 punch. However, I'm sure you guys probably already know this, but 1-2 punch on spreadshot hand cannons is not the same potency as it is on shotguns. In fact, it is half. So normally, as you can see here, my thunderclap fully charged deals 1670 damage, but this time if I activate 1-2 punch from my hand cannon and fully charge the thunderclap, is going to go to 2922, which is a 75% increase. Now, the shotgun version is going to do a fair amount more than that. As you can see here, if I use the shotgun and fully charge, we are going to 4174, which compared to the original is 150% more. However, this isn't a massive loss because, like you saw at the beginning, we are still one-shotting a fair amount of adds, and it's going to take a really chunky target to not be one-shot, or you don't have knockout active or something like that. Initially, I wrote off these hand cannons as not really useful because 1-2 punch on shotguns is just better. However, in the context of this build, because you actually don't need that much damage stacking because you're getting a lot from your thunderclap and 200 melee, having a half potency 1-2 punch is still totally fine. Plus, it also gives you the freedom to run a really good special weapon in your kinetic slot, such as the Mint Retrograde with either rewind rounds, elemental honing, or bait and switch, your choice. This weapon is fantastic. It's basically a heavy weapon if you haven't caught on yet. This thing is probably catching a nerf in the future, but because we are using an energy slot spread shot with 1-2 punch, it lets us run Mint Retrograde. You could run the one from Trials. I believe that one also gets 1-2 punch. However, there aren't currently any rocket frame pulse rifles in the energy slot, so this is the configuration which I like. And unfortunately, if you didn't get this hand cannon during the Arms Week event, you will have to wait for the next iteration to do so. However, I don't think that'll be too long. So in this segment where we discuss artifact perks, again, I'll just have the gameplay rolling in the background for you to see what this build is actually like in some negative power content. In terms of what perks we actually want. The first one is going to be refresh threads in column 3. This one is going to make it so picking up an elemental pickup matching your subclass element or tangle while you have a strand super grants energy to your least charged ability. And because we are spawning ionic traces ever so often, we are going to be getting bonus energy to whatever ability is just lowest charge, which normally would be something like our grenade. So it's just going to be juicing our ionic traces just a little bit more. After that, we are moving into column 4. We have elemental coalescence. This one will make it so defeating targets has the chance to create an elemental pickup matching your equipped super element. And that just means that getting kills from any source is going to make more ionic traces, which again feeds into refresh threads again, giving us even more ability energy. So even with less than optimal stats, you're still going to be getting a lot of energy back with how many traces you are making. Then finally, moving on to the last column, the only perk you really need to worry about is Shield Crush, because this one will make it so whenever you have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or a Void over shield, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. Now, the recharge we don't have to worry about because it's instant, but the increased damage is nice. And then secondly, while you are amplified or radiant, your grenade recharges faster and also deals increased damage. And because we are going to be amplified all the time from the melee kills we are getting, and then also Frost Armor fairly frequently from the diamond lances that we slam, both halves of this perk should be active pretty much all the time. I've also gone for Radiant Shrapnel, which makes so dealing sustained weapon damage while radiant or defeating a scorch combatant with a weapon causes the target to release solar projectiles that deal damage and scorch on impact. And actually, coming back to the firing range for a second, you will see this here. If I just get a kill on this Centurion, I will be radiant, and if I just tap the next Centurion, it does make the blob, which, you know, is just a little bit of extra damage, and it does happen all the time because if you are getting melee kills, you are going to be radiant and you're going to continue spawning in these Seekers, so it's just a little bit of extra damage. The tracking on them is a little leaves a little to be desired, but you know, it's just a bit of extra damage, it can't hurt. And that's basically all you need to worry about for your artifact perks. In general, the artifact is pretty unimpactful for this build since the majority of its strength just comes from the abilities and the reworked exotics and so on. So it isn't terribly necessary to worry about these perks, they just add a nice bonus on top. Of course, it wouldn't be an Edge of Fate build without a section dedicated to your stats, and for that, we of course want 200 melee stat. You probably already saw it in the beginning, but in my opinion, unless your armor is absolutely perfect, your 450 power, you've been farming the loot cave on Kepler and doing all this and all that, you will have to find a compromise between fonts and your actual stats, which is what I've done here. I have 160 melee, and then the other 40 comes from having 2 melee fonts on my gloves, because each one of these will give me 20 points. So therefore, because I'm at 163, it'll put me all the way to 200 once I have any amount of armor charge. So just as a final reminder, having 200 melee will increase your melee damage by 30%, which is multiplicative. So just keep that in mind. Other stats, health, not really necessary because you're going to be healing a bunch from Skullfort and from Knockout. But I do like to have my grenade and super at decent levels. I have 83 grenade here and 94 super, which just means I'm going to be charging my super very quickly. And my grenade is also going to have a pretty decent cooldown on it. Weapons doesn't matter at all, and class doesn't either. And obviously the main stat is just melee. So try to get that to at least 160 and then 83 and 94 for the others, or kind of 80, 80, 90, 90, whatever your armor allows. I'm finally at the point where I'm actually getting decent armor to get these sort of stats, but if you're a bit lower, don't worry about it. You can basically go all the way into melee and you'll still be fine. In terms of set bonuses, there isn't too much that benefits this build directly, but I've just gone for the 2-piece Ion Adapter set, which is just going to make it so whenever I get kills with my Mint Retrograde or any explosive source, it's going to give me 20% AoE splash damage resistance. In fact, I have a video that went out a few days ago going over all of the possible set bonuses in the game and all of their effects. So if you're curious to learn more, then definitely check that video out. But in that video, you will know that I said that set bonuses are more of a cherry on top sort of thing, so don't worry about that if you can't really get it to work. It's just a nice kind of added bonus on top of everything. The other option is to go with a full set of raid gear, which will increase your radiant duration by 50%. So normally with Facet of Dawn, you would have 4 seconds of radiant, but it would give you either 6 or 7 if you have the full raid armor set, which is just a little bit of a longer duration, so that is kind of nice. But again, it just doesn't really matter. It's just a set bonus. It doesn't add that much to the build. The majority of it comes from the exotic armor and the build choices. If you're curious about the mods I use for the build, they are currently on screen now, but I will have a dim link to this build in the description, so don't worry about that. The main idea though is to just have your fonts to boost your melee all the way up to 200. Then I have 2 copies of hands-on on the helmet to get more super energy from melee kills. Then the other important one is having stacks on stacks on your boots, which will just increase the armor charge you get from every orb to 2, so it goes from 1 to 2, giving you more time on your melee fonts. In terms of the optimal gameplay melee loop, this build literally is just spam your melee over and over and just everything dies, because all you need to do is make sure you tap the enemy with your hand cannon, which is going to increase your melee damage, and 9 times out of 10 it's going to kill the enemy that you point your melee at. So just keep doing that over and over, and I promise you will find success. This build is very potent, and I'm seriously considering taking it into the epic raid race happening in Ash and Iron, and just to have it as my main build going forward. And furthermore, you don't necessarily need to be on Prismatic for this build to work. It's just very good on Prismatic. However, you can also use the Arc subclass on this, because it too has access to Thunderclap, and you have Thunder Crash, and you also have Storm's Keep, which despite Flashover being removed from the game is still very essential for any day one group. It was for ours when we did our contest Desert Perpetual, so it really is interchangeable. You can either do Prismatic or you can do Arc. If you're the Ad Clear guy, use Prismatic. If you're the Bolt Charge guy, use Arc. It's basically the same loop, just with a little less utility, like no Diamond Lances and so on. But anyway, that about does it for today's build guide. I am once again experimenting with these more kind of freestyle videos, so do let me know feedback in the comments if you like or don't like these. But it is also just mainly because when you see this video, I'm going to be live on my Twitch doing my 400 to 450 Powerthon climb. So do come and say hi and support me while I am toiling away in the mines. But anyway, just as a reminder, the dim link to this build will be in the description. And if you're curious about the fashion, here is the fashion I have made for this build, inspired by Cripps' community, so shout out to Cripps. So pause or take a screenshot if you want to copy the fashion. But anyway, that about does it for today's video. So if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.